the tab, so you check starting from the very end, so you can introduce yourself and check the microphone.
Okay, I'm Danielle Jacobs. Oh, yes, it works.
Fantastic.
So I'm Danielle Jacobs from Beltec, and Beltec is the Association of CIOs and Digital Technology Leaders in Belgium, so representing business users of cloud services.
Pierre?
Good morning, I'm Pierre Chastenet. I'm the head of unit in charge of cloud policies at the European Commission.
Yes, good morning also from me, Ralph Resch. I'm president of Euritas, which is the association which organizes public services and public administration ICT users in Europe, and also managing director of the German Association of Municipal ICT Organizations.
Yeah.
Thank you. Aisha?
Aisha Yavuz, a partner at EY and focusing on certification work and also monitoring body of EY, which is EY Certified Point.
Francesco Bonfiglio, CEO of GaiaX.
Thank you for being here. Thank you again for joining us after your coffee. I'd like to keep this panel as much as fluid as possible as a conversation. But just to introduce what I call the policy, the digital policy panel, and this very distinguished panel. We heard this morning Pierre Sodonahue say, there's a lot of legislation ongoing. Some of it is adopted, some is in the final stage, DSA, DMA, the Data Act. And this is an important one for us today because as cloud infrastructure provider, we are announcing today an initiative that some of you are already supporting, which consists in the anticipating the entry into force of the Data Act, and already as an industry, but working with customer, developing the technical specification which we are allowed to identify and also refer all the portable services that should be under the Data Act, become the norm tomorrow and facilitate portability switching between cloud providers. This is an important element which will be in the question, but to get this started, maybe also I'll start with Pierre and in his role as a responsible for the unit policy, the unit dealing with the cloud policies at European level. If you can tell us a little bit of, this is the end of we're arriving the last bit of the van der Leyen Commission. What is still now on your desk that needs to be closed? What are the priorities for the remaining months? Maybe you can tell us something, and then we can ask a specific element on this priority. And I was thinking of public procurement, which it came a lot. We also would like to see how the market is reacting, and GaiaX I think is important. Also, legislation. There's a lot of legislation. How to make it work better. I mean, is the industry certification standards? This is something for ISA. Maybe you can intervene on this. And then obviously the perspective of the customers for cloud services and software, both customers in the private sector, but also the public agency, government agencies who are very important procurer and user of IT technology. But maybe Pierre, please. Tell us a little bit more on what's ahead for you in the coming year or so.
Okay, many thanks. And maybe first of all, to start, the Commission has been working since the very beginning of this college on the basis of a data strategy, and this is still guiding our action today. So we're very much working against what we promised at the beginning of the mandate, and are very much on track on what we have promised. So if you look at all the pieces of legislation that we promised on setting up the right framework condition to allow the development of the data economy in Europe, we're totally on track with this. We have had the data strategy in the first place, but then the Data Governance Act, which is finished to be negotiated. and the Data Act, which has progressed significantly over the past couple Czech and Swedish presidency. The Parliament adopted its report last week. So again, we're very much on track in that respect. When it comes to cloud, the data infrastructure was a very important element of the data strategy. We can't have all these things developing in the data economy if we don't have very strong data infrastructures and services in Europe. And there are really two dimensions that are to be taken into consideration in that respect. One is the rules. We need to have common rules for any operator in Europe to abide by these rules. And secondly, we need to invest in cloud technologies in Europe. When it comes to rules, so there are important components when it comes to cloud in the Data Act. We want to bring fluidity into the cloud market in Europe. I think we have heard a lot about this earlier this morning. There is really a competition problem on cloud market in Europe, and we need to make it more fluid for users in particular, to be able to pick the infrastructure, the services that correspond to their need, but also be able to move easily to service provider when they are not happy with the service provider, or whenever their needs become different or evolve over time. So competition, switching is very important in that respect. Going a bit further on rules and things that are still on our desk in that respect, we have been working a lot with the public authorities over the past year under the framework of the Alliance for Industrial Data Edge and Cloud, and we would like to publish a guidance on public procurement for cloud in Europe. The Commission has injected a significant amount of money via the Resilience and Recovery Facility across all the member states for cloud, notably to modernize public administration. So member states are really benefiting from investment to go for a cloud-first approach, and we know that this is something CISPE has been preaching a lot over the past years. So we totally welcome this. But we see that sometimes public administration go a bit in dispersed order. So we've been working very closely with them to try to harmonize the practices on how to conduct cloud public procurement, and to make sure that they are going to be protecting themselves and the administration that they are representing in those procurements. Maybe the last element, Piers mentioned it this morning, but I would like to emphasize on this aspect, is the cloud rulebook. So we intend to integrate all the self-regulatory work that the Commission has been working on over the past almost decade, as we saw. So we have quite a number of code of conduct, certification mechanisms, standards. It's all very good, but we see a major gap in compliance with those self-regulatory elements. So it's great that industry has contributed significantly to the development of those self-regulatory mechanisms, but who's really compliant with all this? Who has really made the effort to declare adherence to these different self-regulatory mechanisms? So we want to bring this under a single comprehensive umbrella, and then have the possibility to see for users in particular, both public and private, who's actually abiding by the European rules. I'll stop it.
Thank you for this introduction. There's clearly, I wouldn't call it a flurry, but almost, of new rule, new regulation. And I have lots of questions that I'd like to ask both the user of cloud and software technology, also the respect for the rules and the coming forward, which is something very important for us today in light of the initiative to have several hundred services declare portable or identified as portable under the Data Act. Before I go to ask some question about more generally the market to Francesco, I would just like to pick our colleagues from the user, the customer community, and ask a bit of their reaction, specifically more concentrated on the portability aspect, because there's a lot, and thankfully there will be a rule book. We'll come to that. But what is what are your expectations when it comes to these new rules, the Data Act, the portability? Maybe Danielle first and Ralph for the public sector perspective.
Well, our expectations are very, very high. And I can say it was great listening to Professor Jenny, because it was just as being in our vendor management task force, where we have a lot of vendor managers explaining their difficulties with cloud. And what is a little bit frightening is we just did a market research, and it will be published in April. And what we've seen is that the last 2 years, our companies are mostly mid-size and larger companies, that they come a little back from the cloud-first strategy, which is a shame, because 2 years ago, it's okay, cloud, that's the way to go. And where they are now seeing, okay, we have price rises, we have the vendor lock-in, it's a reality. And I'm not only talking about the hyperscalers or the SAPs and the Oracles. It also can be with niche players. You are just bound if you're using clouds. It's like Mr. Jenny said, it's like a marriage. Well, marriage is maybe a little bit happier, hopefully. But it's a reality that it's a very difficult situation. And I can give you a lot of examples, but I think the examples are known better by you than I can explain. So that is why, together with the CIO associations from France, Netherlands, and Germany, we invested a lot in the Data Act. We also participate in the expert group making standard contractual clauses for cloud, which is a very difficult thing. Porting, switching, having termination clauses, having exit plans from the beginning when you start. These are all very important. And we were disappointed by the work done by SWIPO. There we expected something to be better and to improve the situation, but we were very disappointed if we see the little number of cloud providers adhering to SWIPO Code of Conduct.
Thank you, Danielle. Maybe Ralph, a reaction from the government agency, the public sector user of cloud and software, please.
Yes, thank you. For my members, for Euritas members, it's very important to have a reduction in dependencies. That is what we are really caring for. My members produce the services, the IT services for Europe's governments, and therefore we need, of course, a political independency. We can discuss the concept of sovereignty, but I don't like it that much, because I think reducing dependency is what we should achieve. So there's a political dimension to it, and that is mostly covered by the GDPR discussions, which I'm not going into now. There is also an economical dimension, and that has been covered by Professor Jenny's study, and I think we should really invest a lot of effort and thought into the analysis of the dependencies in an economic sphere. If it is 20% extra cost for the private sector, it will be at least 20% for the public sector too, and that is taxpayers' money. So I think that is very important to know, that we should keep European growth in Europe mostly, not exclusively, but mostly, and not give it away just like that. Yeah, so let's put it like this. And also, there's the technological dimension of dependency, and that is what this discussion is also about. That is, we need to have the free choice, I would say. As agencies, we need to put the services where we want to put them, and we need to be able to put the data there where we want it, and then we need to be able to switch again. And that is also an element which disciplines the market players. That is also very important in economic respect. And therefore, we are very happy that you started that initiative. We welcome it. And I think we should also discuss about closer forms of cooperation in that respect. And we are very, very happy that portability is an issue also on the European political level. And I think that is one of the most important building blocks that ensures the reduction of dependency. I'm not a friend of autonomy, or that is not the way to go. You cannot be alone in this world. It's a global market. It's a global system. But we should look in Europe where we have our point, and should not give up to economic, technological, or political dependencies.
Thank you, Ralph. So I heard you and we heard you loud and clear, Danielle, on the you will be very demanding and put the bar very high when it comes to the industry commitment, portability. So please push us, and that will be very helpful, I think, for both vendors and the customers. Reacting to Ralph and maybe looking at Francesco, you talked about dependencies. Gaia-X is an industrial initiative which has a strong focus on creating alternatives or more competition on the market, more choice, more diversity. You have the federated services. There is a demo which is becoming now something different, but you have more than 1,500 services which have been declared as part of the Gaia-X federated services. This is evolving into something else. Maybe you can tell us more how what you're doing with Gaia-X is going to help create alternative, more competition on the marketplace, less dependency that Ralph was mentioning. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a perspective on this, Francesco.
Maybe let me step back to where Gaia-X was born, and I think it's worthwhile for everybody to remember that Gaia-X was born as a political initiative from France and Germany. At that time, US was the enemy. Let's be very honest, and it was an enemy under many different, playing fields. But for sure, at that time, it was not so clear what Gaia-X would have turned out to be. Not in technological terms, not in rules terms, not in also kind of the adoption we have had in time. Also, it was not clear the size of the phenomenon we are trying to address here. So thanks to Professor Genie and all the predecessors in the panel, because when we talk about numbers, and I just want to share this with you because this is my gut feeling, I see two things. First, well, when you see numbers, you kind of give a size to this beast. Second, you say, how is it possible we did not realize this leapfrog effect? And I think the leapfrog is the effect. We have been realizing too late. We were giving out our data, and in 2016, we made the GDPR. Pierre, don't look at me. I know I make the joke. It was kind of closing the gates when the cows have gone, but that was the kind of effect that actually got us a little bit stuck in transforming digitally in the industry. Why? Because everybody was scared about the 4% of the revenues fine, and the providers were scared about doing something wrong. The users of technology were scared about infringing something that they could not actually deal. And I was on the business side, so I talk on my experience. I'm not talking about theoretical things here. Then I'm very glad we see all this new regulation coming around the corner, and in particular on the Data Act, because that compensates exactly the gaps that the GDPR did not introduce. The GDPR said what you cannot do with data, but it didn't say what you can do with data. And here we are talking about what can we do with data? Nothing if you don't have, a competitive and trustworthy data infrastructure. And that's where Gaia-X turned out to be, okay, this is what we have to do. So first of all, we said digital sovereignty is a political concept. I agree with you, Ralph. Nonetheless, let's not forget that political things have a meaning. So you cannot have any sovereignty in any state because you cannot apply your laws, you cannot control your economy unless you are in control. And unfortunately, everybody realizes today that technology can work around any law. That's a fact. So that's why we talk about digital sovereignty, which I don't like as a term, but I understand and I can explain. So we said, what do we mean by digital sovereignty? We need three things: controllability, transparency, and interoperability. That was the key, foundational elements of Gaia-X. Then we ask ourselves, what do we need to implement those things? And the key solution was we need to have a core of that we call the trust framework. So an engine that is capable to verify the transparency, the controllability, and the interoperability of the services that anybody wants to use. But last but not least, we said, let's not be naive. The problem of competition cannot be solved by regulation. Not at all. The market belongs just to the market. So if you really want to change the competition, you need to do something that entrepreneurs, startups know very well. You have to do something the market needs, is not out there, and you're the first doing it. And that's what Gaia-X is doing. We are doing first in the world, I would say, and we should be very proud because sometimes Europe leads. We are translating this concept of digital sovereignty into something tangible and measurable. We are bridging the gap between technology regulation and regulation technology, because let's be honest, we have a growing amount of regulations that cannot be fulfilled by the providers and by the users. What I mean is that you as a provider struggle to understand how to fulfill with the regulation, and you as a user struggle to understand if the technology you want to buy is fulfilling the regulation. So if we don't bridge this gap, we have a problem. And I think the problem is coming out. And you don't have to think about ChatGPT, but that's just the last chap around the corner. You cannot control technology. So what we do at GaiaX, we defined this set of rules, which is an initial set of rules. Then we define a framework that is capable to verify automatically those rules. And we are delivering this framework inside an engine that in the next weeks, actually the first release is going to be next week, and that's why I'm a bit nervous, but it's coming out, the first nodes. We call them the digital clearing houses. So the digital clearing houses are going to be nodes of execution of the GaiaX certification, if you want, the GaiaX compliance services. But not just that. The clearinghouse will be the point you go to if you want to become part of GaiaX. If you want to create a federation, if you want to join a federation, you want to publish your services in the GaiaX catalog, you want to create your own catalog, and on and on and on. So all the questions the people raised about what the heck is GaiaX, you're going to have an answer. But let me go back. Why we're doing something the market does not, the market is waiting for, and that's to go into back to your question. The market of cloud has to change, and this is dramatically true. In other words, data are everywhere. So the hyperscaler offering we've been talking this morning, and I think you will be talking, you will keep talking about, are not suited for the world of data. Period. Like it or not, the hyper-centralized architectures are not suitable for the edge revolution. And the edge revolution is a great opportunity for Europe as well and for anybody. We are an inclusive association. But you have to change completely your architecture. In other words, you cannot bring the data to the compute anymore. In the mobility, in the healthcare, you cannot pretend that this paradigm will work. It will never work anymore. We need to leave the data as close as possible where the data is produced. Then we need to create the most capillary, the most distributed cloud infrastructure. This requires federation. This requires data exchange mechanisms. And of course, this requires compliance mechanisms. These three mechanisms, federation, compliance, and data exchange, are the pillar of the GaiaX framework. And to give you some numbers, I said that we're going to deliver what we promised, 21. Okay, step back. Let me say that, Francisco, you know me, but I joined in 21. And the initiative started in 2019. So if you want to complain with me about what happened before, you can do that, but unfortunately, I can speak about what happened from 21 on. 21, we design what I am describing to you, definition. 22, we implemented it. 23, we deployed it on the market. Simple. What is going to happen? We have 400 members. We started with 0, and now we have 11 Lighthouse projects. We started with 0, and now we have 110 projects, which are growing and becoming more projects. We started with 0, and now we have 1,500 services in a demo catalog. It's a demo simply because we have not switched on the certification services yet. But once we switch them on, we have more than 30 providers willing to publish services in the GaiaX conformant way. So this is going to be a tangible sign that an alternative is available. There is technology providers that are willing to be transparent. There is technology providers that are willing to be federated. They don't want to fight each other. They want to create federation to be stronger, build a critical mass. There is projects down there of members that have invested their own money to build their own business cases. They have not received public funding to solve business problems. And we're starting to collect that experience. I think that we are kind of expressing the voice of the market and building, I like to say that, bottom-up instead of top-down. I think there are too many people have been preaching to the prayers. We're starting to collect real data. I'll pause here.
I love you. I love it because you're always so passionate about Gaia. So that's good. I want to bounce back on this notion of certification, on the fact that even with the best intention, even with the best legislator, sometimes technology can be difficult to regulate, even if you take an approach based on principles. So to make sure that the legislation actually is implemented as it should be, there are standards and there is certification, which is also very central to the federated services, the verifiable credential in Gaia-X. And I'd like to ask Isa to tell us about her experience using and verifying criteria defined in standards, like in the GDPR code that CISPE has made for infrastructure. I'd like us to tell you how, in your experience, standards and certification can help implement and make the legislation actually true in the technology, in the use of the technology, in the deployment of technology. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, of course. And I'm very happy that also Pierre has mentioned the importance of compliance, because that's where I see the role of a certification body and the role of an impartial audit process to really strengthen the transparency in the market, so to say, and help organizations to build trust. Because, yeah, we discuss security by design, and what we call is trust by design. And that's why in the concept of trust by design, for organizations not only to be compliant, but to really have to be ahead of the competition in today's market conditions, certification is extremely critical, first of all, because certification is not only helping an organization to demonstrate that you have mature practices in a specific area, let this be security, let this be sustainability or data protection as the code, with the code experience, but it also shows an organization's commitment to become better in just not only complying with the regulation, but also to excel and improve in it. Because in a certification process, or for those who are not very familiar with it, it is about going through an audit journey year on year, going through assessments, which helps an organization to look into the gaps you have in a specific domain or an area, or for a regulation as well. And just it helps an organization to get better day by day, year on year, with improved practices. Yeah, and this obviously takes us to the transparency point that has been mentioned as well, because at the end of this, it just helps to enable transparency, to really provide the information in an understandable and accessible way to users, to customers, so they can also make more informed decisions about a product or a service, because that can just be establishing the trust in the market amongst all the stakeholders involved.
So certification standards extremely important for Gaia-X. In your practice, being a monitoring body for the CISPE GDPR code of conduct and code of conduct standards, all of these can be certified, verified by an organization like yours. You are, in a way, and your company is delegated with almost a quasi-legislative or judiciary, let's say, function to oversee that companies provide the service with the characteristics that comply with the law, and to verify that these characteristics are indeed those that are advertised. How do you see, I mean, this is a very innovative role, I think, for certification body. What is your experience working specifically on that type of certification around the GDPR? What has been your experience, and maybe you can share a couple of anecdotes if you have any.
Yes, actually it is, indeed, it is a set of criteria, and GDPR is always a good example, like the code of conduct. It's not necessarily the GDPR, so to say, but we are also working with regulators on different schemes that touch upon GDPR too. But it is just, indeed, that conversation is not only, we find, I think what stands out in certification experience, if you do it in an impartial and independent audit, so that's also something that is important for the code and the approach that is defined around the code, then the depth of the conversations also you go with between auditee and the auditor what we see is that we find ourselves not only discussing the compliance to a specific rule, but also thinking in innovative ways or creative ways how to stay compliant but be a bit more efficient and effective in the way you manage it, which I think is also quite crucial. And I think that makes the process even more interesting and more successful for those who want to go for the certification process. And we really enjoy it very much, especially working with an industry group, because if I take CISPE Code of Conduct, GDPR is with all respect, it's quite a broad regulation. And really, these industry, like associations working on industry codes really help it to make it specific, etc. And this is something that we also very much enjoy because we really discuss the industry specifics when we are performing audits in relation to a code that is specific to the industry, and in this case, it's the cloud.
Okay, thank you. I will come to you, Ralph, in a second. I think I'd like to also move a little bit back to the, Pierre, you mentioned the rule book because there's a quantity, an important quantity of rules and requirement. You mentioned public procurement. I think it's important also for the, the constituency of Ralph organization. What role do you see in implementing this rule book requirement and running proper public procurement tenders when it comes to cloud computing? I think maybe you want to intervene on that point, Ralph, or you had a different point?
Yeah, you just snatched my question away.
So please.
Yeah, that is the point. It sounds a little bit of a complicated matter. And in the public sector, we know that public procurement can be very complicated. So it gets more and more complicated. So my question to you, Pierre, is in how far would that rule book on procurement of cloud services be made compulsory, a binding rule book? Because for the situation in Germany, I can tell you that we have a working group in the Ministry of the Interior where the industry is represented exclusively. So we find this a little bit of a difficult situation because the buyer's side is not, the user side is not represented at all. And we are in discussions with the ministry and how far our experiences could be incorporated into the development of a further sort of framework. But in how far, and that's always the question, in how far can that rule book be made compulsory? In how far is it binding for the members of the EU?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what we have seen developing over the years, generally the Commission has taken a very self-regulatory approach to the cloud market. I think a couple of you mentioned this, that cloud is a very fast evolving technology, and it's difficult to keep up with the pace of the evolution of that technology through regulation. So generally we have taken an approach that let's not regulate, we are going to work with industry in order to develop common rules, self-regulatory rules, in cooperation with industry. But then those rules need to be followed by all actors on the market. That's the only way it can work. So as this is largely based on self-regulation, the rule book per se is not coming up with any binding rules other than those that are already specified in legislation, like the GDPR, for instance, like the Data Act when it's going to come into force. But what is important for what we see on the many providers of the market is to maybe recall what are those rules, because we sometimes see that there is a certain degree of ignorance or not always willingness to adhere by the regulation, or sometimes genuinely a misunderstanding on how the rules, which are generally high level set out in EU legislation, how these rules practically cascade in something as complex as technical implementation of cloud services. So that's what the rule book aims to specify. So non-binding rules, generally, other than recalling the legislation, but also trying to describe what are the operational mechanisms that company can use to demonstrate compliance with those rules. Now, practically for public sector, and that's the other side of what we're working on the guidance for public procurement, is also how can you use those rules to set out in your tender specifications, because more or less they are the same. So as you can expect, there will be a lot of consistency between the two documents that the Commission wants to publish there.
Thank you.
So guidance, not mandatory. Now, turning to Danielle, I mean, even if the Commission publishes guidance on public procurement of cloud services and related software, is that something that the private sector will look at or will be perhaps influence or adopt? Or will you follow a completely different, let's say, path or guidance?
Well, we absolutely need a lot of guidance. Making the link between public institutions, public sector and private sector. So within our member base, we have a lot of public institutions as well. And I do understand very well the issues you are talking about. We have a task force on public tendering and bringing innovation in digital applications using the cloud. It's very, very difficult if you need to follow the guidance, the regulatory regime of the public tendering and so on. But okay, that's a side note. What we do like very much is to have standard contractual clauses, because when we started working with the 4 associations, you have the CISPE FAIR principles, but we also have our FAIR principles.
They're very close, huh?
Yeah,
very close, I've noticed.
They're very close, but yours are based really on infrastructure, and ours are also for software as a service and so on. But okay, they match pretty well. But for us, it's very important that for infrastructure, you can do something in the context of the cloud rulebook. We really are looking forward to what Gaia-X is going to be. But there are some unfair practices on the market which will not be tangible to take into formats or services. And so there, the example of the GDPR with standard contractual clauses, which are really very popular within our membership, that is something we absolutely like. And so we're looking forward to the cloud rulebook, because it became complicated also for the business user side. I'm doing this job quite for a long time, and until a couple of years ago on IT and digital, there was not so much of interest to follow the regulations. Now it becomes very, very important in companies to be just aware of what is going to be the Data Act and other initiatives. GDPR was a kind of wake-up call, but with a lot of negative sentiment, as was told, like, we are not able to do this and this and this anymore. It should be positive, because data is really, it's in the core of companies. If you see all this company data, they are in cloud services, and companies are scared about it, because they say, okay, it's not only to be compliant, that's an important part with regulations, but it also from where do we put our data, and not only talking about privacy, it's also just the company data, which really has a lot of confidential parts in it. And it's the dependence again. So you cannot move your data out of the cloud. And for example, one of the questions we get now a lot the last months is, what is happening now with all this artificial intelligence? For artificial intelligence, you need a lot of data to train the algorithms. Are they using our data to train the algorithms? And is the scale effect even going to play more and making maybe the hyperscalers even more important than they already are? So there are a lot of concerns. And so we look to you. Regulation will not solve everything, but...
and we can't impose standard contractual clauses by law. However, what we can do is monitor those market players who will effectively transpose those standard contractual clauses in their contracts.
I'd like to come back to that and the making sense of the jungles of rules and requirements, and I'll ask Francesco, since clearly Gaia-X is about creating also more competition, alternative to offering by large international companies, hyperscaler. I'll ask Francesco, based on this approach on the verifiable credential, which are basically standards that have been verified by a third party, but which are read by in a readable, in software readable, machine readable format. Do you think, and is it the goal of Gaia-X to create these alternative offers, aggregated services which fit the federated service labels. How do you see the contribution of Gaia-X to create more alternative and more competition that could suit the needs of the user, public and private users?
I see it from a very pragmatical standpoint, and we need to be aware of the constituency, let me say, of the European economy. We're talking about small, medium business. We're talking about startups. We have by far the best startup ecosystem in the world. This is the reality. What's the problem in being more competitive? I think we need a compelling event, and like I said, the data is helping us now because the next generation of the cloud technology is going to be hyper-distributed, no doubts. I mean, all the venture capitalists, they are not investing in central cloud anymore, they're investing in edge. Whatever is cloud technologies must be edge. So that's an opportunity. Second, everybody wants transparency. Like it or not, this is the demand of the market. Third, regulation is complicated. So we are increasing the barriers, the access barriers, in particular for the small ones that cannot afford even invest in the time of an FTE to understand all the regulation coming around the corner. So my gamble, and I believe it's not just mine, is that we truly believe that building something simpler that can give access to anybody who just want to be visible in an automated way, because that's what Gaia-X, the promise of Gaia-X. So you don't have to go through complex processes of endorsement, onboarding, reading tons of paper regulation. You can just freely decide that you want to be visible as Gaia-X compliant. What you have to do, describe yourself. It's like an identity card of your digital service. I'm sure this will open the market to many that today are just invisible. And I'm sure because in our constituency, we have a lot of small, medium business and a lot of startups that are investing their blood because they have no money. If they stay in an association like this, is because they realize they can have bigger visibility, they can possibly become visible, and they can possibly aggregate and create that critical mass that we miss. Because the only problem of Europe is the critical mass. We're not missing skills, we're not missing technology, we're not missing, let me say, regulation for sure. We have a lot of that. We are just missing the critical mass to compete. But the good news is that now the critical mass does not have to be vertical. It has to be very much horizontal and a combination. So I think this is the real change. Of course, there's always a but. The but is that people sometimes believe, okay, Gaia-X is coming around the corner and it will solve our problems. Well, 80% of the problem here is business. Because you have to take a decision if you want to federate, for example, with another cloud service provider. And that's a key business decision. It's nothing that technology can solve. Would you decide that it's better for you to share your market with another player, I don't know, in Spain, if you're Italian or French? Is this a problem today or an opportunity? It must be an opportunity. Are you willing to invest in creating a complementary offering? Is this a problem or an opportunity? If it is an opportunity, believe me, the market is waiting for that. And the joke I make, I don't want Gaia-X to become Gaia-Y. Because the lower part of the X is the federation of infrastructure. The upper part is the federation of data. The federation of data is happening as we speak. We have tons of projects. But they are looking back and say, okay, who is ready to run our data spaces? Guess whom? So we need to run fast. This is a call to action.
You're teasing my member because some of them here in
that's why
some of the owners, CEOs are here.
That's why I'm
listening to you, and I'll ask them, if they think that federating or joining, aggregating the services with competitors in other market is an option, a way forward for them. But before I go there, I mean, you are increasingly relying to make it simple for the regulation to be integrated and implemented in the service. You're using verifiable credentials, which are basically third-party verified.
We are using the W3C standards, which is going to come anyway. So the Gaia-X is a DAO, is a decentralized autonomous organizations, the decentralized architecture. We are using the verifiable credential for the W3C. We're using the self-sovereign identity concepts. So we are using all the stuff that is coming anyway, but in an instrumental way. Let's use it to create this engine of verification, of trustability of services. And to me, the transparency is far more important than the content. In other words, if we leave the freedom of choice, but the service provider will show where they deliver the service, what is the service composition, they countersign digitally with a crypto signature, they are verified through external CABs, conformance assessment bodies, not in the traditional way, exchanging paper, but in a digital way, integrating and having a certification, a digital verification of the certification embedded in the serve description. You can imagine this is going to be extremely simplifying. It's going to make everything extremely more easy to understand, and you don't need to go through a lot of, documents to understand whether that service is reliable or not. Not only interoperability, and we talk about the Data Act, is the key word now and in the next couple of years, I'm sure. There's no single interoperability. I'm a strong believer in semantic interoperability. But let's be honest, semantic interoperability is a paradigm. You cannot pretend that everybody will be interoperable in the same way. No way. But what we can do, we can give an opportunity to those that want to be interoperable to describe it, to show it in a transparent way, and they will drive. This is a way to lead the market. Because if I show that my service is interoperable, I describe how, I describe the list of interoperable services, believe me, the others will want to show the same. And in this way, we create a positive competition. That's what we aim to.
So I think that's what the initiative that we are launching today is about. We want to make sure that as many companies, not just members of CISPE, but competitors outside of the organization from different countries, get together, look at the Data Act, look at the requirement, and they agree on a set of joint, technical specification, which will make easily to identify services that are portable according to this legislation, and possibly turn this into some verifiable credential that can be used in your federated service database. So now the question, I'd like to just put the question to both of you. So for you, is this kind of contribution something that Gaia X needs to have more service to succeed in its mission of creating alternative? Isa, maybe do you see an increasing role for companies like EY Certified Point in providing this kind of services that allow the customer to understand that a service conform with the law or not, and also for Pierre, do you welcome when and how helpful is it helpful for you to know that industry is taking steps to have standard, to certify against those standards, which should implement the legislation, the different regulatory requirements? Is this something that you want to see and you expect to see in order to get the legislation actually implemented? And for the user and the customer, I mean, is this also something that you would like to see? More easier, let's say, ways to select services that conform with the legislation and that are recognized as such through certification, third-party certification, or to database, which a federated service like Gaia is proposing. It's a general question, please.
Yeah. I would like to add to what was being said by the small companies. So in our European economy, there are a lot of small companies, that's true. And sometimes, well, not sometimes, very often we get rejection, but you're always talking about the mid-size and the large companies, and they have all the people and they know everything. It is not true. Small companies, mid-sized companies, large companies, at the user side, they are all in the same situation. If you have, for example, GDPR compliance, if you are a company with 5 people, okay, your compliance is something, if you're only 5, but the scale is also small. If you are a large international company, the problem is much higher. And even if you have some more people to do the compliance, it's difficult always. So we absolutely welcome certification schemes, easy to apply models. Like if Gaia X really would succeed, it's incredible, because then we just have to trust, okay, here we can use these services. We also expect some other certification schemes at the European level. upcoming, and they are really, really well welcomed.
Okay, compliance is a really, people maybe sometimes see it as, oh, it's boring, it's applying European regulation, European rules. You have to see this as a go-to-market tool. It's a superb marketing tool. You're a small provider, you want to make your services and the quality of your service visible. Go to compliance, go to certification, because this will give you the credentials that allow you to access the entirety of the European market. It's a very, very powerful go-to-market tool.
Agreed. Putting out tenders is a really tedious work for us in the public sector. So as I join you in this argument, do it as simple as possible for us, and make it legally easy for us to establish that, and then compliance will be surely a very good argument, and that is one of the key elements then.
Yeah, and I see also our role growing, and if I would compare it with like just 3 years ago when we started as a monitoring body, now the demand from the market is extremely increasing. In terms of like every contractual agreement almost requires a certification, a proof of compliance with a standard, with a criteria set, with regulation today. And we are extremely proud that we want to continue our investment in really being in the lead when it comes to artificial intelligence. So we are really like holding our breath to jump onto a new next topic because we also see the value that we bring to the market. And I think it's for all certification bodies and monitoring bodies. We have a huge responsibility to make sure that we remain independent, impartial assessors to give comfort and confidence to the market.
Thank you.
What I want, you ask, what do you want? So I said, from the institution, from the commission, what I'm looking for is alignment, and I have to say that we have strong alignment, so that makes me very comfortable. What I want from my members and the users and the providers of technology is believing in what we're doing, because we can only succeed through real market adoption. What I'm looking forward, looking at you, Aisha, I believe the next generation of certification is becoming very much around RegTech, which we are building a kind of RegTech engine, and I think the future of certification is going to be very much around technology, objective verification, less subjective, less human-driven, and I look forward for this strong collaboration. And going to the audience in general, I'm not so optimistic. Francisco knows me, behind the scenes. But today, I have to say, I am very optimistic about what GaiaX is going to deliver. I'm very proud, very optimistic, and I'm excited about what is going to happen, because it's not going to be linear, it's going to be exponential. But I need the support of the European cloud service providers, all the cloud service providers in general, but believe me, the demand that I hear louder and louder is, please make sure that besides the acceleration of the data spaces, the common data spaces creation, which is happening, is becoming huge. Catena X, a bigger project called Manufacturing X is coming around the corner. We have, lots of companies federating and sharing data based on GaiaX. They desperately need a federated cloud service provider network. And I can tell you that when this thing goes down on the market, it's going to be a breakthrough. The market is waiting for a GaiaX compliant, cloud service provider offering. And that goes through, your willingness and your belief into what we're doing to make sure that GaiaX remains an X and not a Y.
So thank you. I'll ask the room a couple of questions in a second. I think we hear you. Huh? We've been on the forefront of delivering certified GDPR, not just certified GDPR, but also certified processing and storing of data in Europe when the customer wanted. This is a certified functionality and a commitment of CISPE. We are, and we will discuss this afternoon about sustainability. We have helped created the Pact for Climate Neutral Data Center, and now this Pact is issuing its first standards to reach climate neutrality by 2030. And I could read, I was delighted to see that in some of the working group in the Gaia X, this sustainability from the criteria from the pact are finally making it into the criteria for your verifiable credential. We have committed, and hopefully this is before the summit in November in, I think it's Alicante. Alicante, it's the 9th, huh?
Yeah.
The Gaia X Summit. So we will try to deliver as many, as an industry, as many portable services or service identified as portable with the criteria corresponding to the Data Act. I think we hear the call, and the members of CISPE and others are delivering on their commitment. We are actually an organization that delivers. We don't necessarily do lobby in the parliament. We just deliver the value and the tools for the market, for both the vendors and the customers. And I think we will continue doing that because that's our DNA. But now I take advantage to ask our colleagues and the providers in the room, please, what do you think about this vision of the future of the cloud industry in Europe? No, it doesn't work.
It's off.
Hello, can you identify you?
Yes. I'm Paolo Zani from Iridios, service provider, cloud service provider from Italy. I appreciated very much the discussion. I have two questions. One question for Francesco and one probably for Daniele or also Ralph, if you want to reply. The question to Francesco is why the Struttura X, let's say, or the federated infrastructure from service provider, from small service provider, will add something to, let's say, to the service provider like us. We are a small service provider. We lack of visibility, for sure. So we are not visible now in the market, and that's when you say it's a problem of business, okay. So what the federation can add to us to make us more visible? And the question to Daniele is almost the same. What we feel now is that we are really invisible to your companies. Mm-hmm. So I see a lot of companies going directly to hyperscaler without even notice or seeing that there are something other services, maybe more regional for sure, but available. So what way can we make to be more visible to your companies? Thank you.
Do you want me to go first?
Yes.
Well, the answer is in your question. You need to federate to become more visible and to increase the reach. And what you gain is very simple. There is no single provider in Europe, not just Iridios. We know each other very well, but I can talk. I mean, when I talk with Stefano Cecconi of Aruba, me and Stefano tells me, I need to survive. It's a matter of survival. And we're talking about one of the largest cloud service providers in Europe. So no single cloud service provider will resist. We didn't show numbers. We had a drop in the last 4 years of the market share of European cloud service provider, and they are going to reach less than 10% in the next year. It's a 2-digit drops year over year. And we have an increase in the total addressable market. So that's a fact. Why is this happening? You say correctly, people don't know us. Well, sometimes this is not true. People know you, they don't trust you. Why? Because they trust somebody else based on the feeling, sometimes it's a gut feeling, they are better. And this is almost true all the times, because if you manage bigger data, if you manage many virtual machines, if you manage many territories, you can scale up and out much better than a smaller player. But the world is changing. The world is changing in an hyper-distributed model. And believe it or not, now customers, maybe Danielle, you can confirm, they are looking for solutions that are, first of all, interoperable, switchable, across territories, because their business is very much borderless, and where they can leave the data as much as possible where it is. Also, don't forget that the big names we are talking about, all the people in the business know, they have a completely different business model than the European cloud service provider. Non-European cloud service provider are selling licenses. They are not selling services. European cloud service providers, most of the time, they are selling services. In this new era, it is paramount to have the service, the resources, and the professional services behind. So federating creates critical mass. Adopting Gaia X, creating a competitive advantage because nobody has it in the world. And we are opening hubs outside. I have 3 hubs in the US, California, Texas, and Washington. because they need it. And the, let me say, the combination of services and resources is pretty unique in Europe. But that's my point of view.
I think it's
Yes,
okay.
we'll take your question in a second.
Well, I cannot do the marketing of the cloud service providers, but what I do see from the business user side is that they are not looking to all of the markets. There are a lot of players, and it's easy to choose what you know or what you see or what your other companies are using. So there is a problem. And I think the only way to solve it is that we really go to another world. And then I'm coming back to what Professor Jenny was explaining there. If you have companies doing combinations in offerings, bundling new services, and it's made easier for customers, then they will stay in that class. We've seen the graph where the market shares of the hyperscalers only becomes bigger and not smaller. So I really hope Francesco is right and that the market model is going to change, because otherwise it will be a very poor market where we will end up. But to get there, we absolutely need to have another dimension in the business market for cloud services. But because the way it is now happening, that is not okay.
You want to react, Ralph?
Yes, for the public sector, the point is that we already have certain service providers, productivity software, office software, and so on, and they pull us up into the cloud and leave us no choice, and that is the issue. So you're out of the game anyway, and that's not a good situation. We don't like this, and we need to find remedies against this forcing by, it's not nudging, it's really force, that brute force in some cases. And it's not only one company, it's several companies who do that. It can be national companies, it can be international companies. The strategy is always the same. And we have 11,000 mayors in Germany, for instance, and they are autonomous in their decision how they organize their town hall, their administration. And they have a certain, how could I say, bias towards to keep with those suppliers which they have already software bought from. And so it's quite important also to raise awareness that there's a world beyond what you know. And that is one of the difficult tasks, and certification, other mechanisms can very well help to at least readjust the scales, I would say. And that is important. Anyway, the market is different in the public sector for the moment than it is in the private sector, because we need different services. But in fact, it is almost a monopoly for one company. Yeah, it is.
I was trying not to go back to the first panel with Professor Jenny, but he keeps going back to the practices of certain companies who are actually capturing market share from European providers by bundling and tying. So clearly this is a problem, and despite all the legislation, Data Act, portability, if this situation continues, we've seen the market share of European cloud provider divided by 2 over the last 4 years, and it's clearly, let's say, a sign that something is not right on the market. So if this continues, we might find ourselves with very little alternative to very large companies and hyperscaler. Maybe we have one last minute for one last question. Yes, please.
Tiziana Ferrari, GI Foundation. I'd like to sparkle a bit of controversy in the debate of the panel. And I'd like also to bring our experience as a European Federation of Research Cloud Providers serving the academic and research sector. In our experience, having rules of participation and compliance in practice raises the bar for the federation members, because it's expensive to comply and align to policies. And there is a potential risk that regulating or over-regulating in the end stifles innovation or creates barriers for SMEs. So I'd like to have the opinion of Pierre on this very topic. And perhaps another topic, the cost of federation is high, and operating as a federation member has an overhead, which means you operate, in our experience, as a federation member when you have a business value in doing this, but federation doesn't lower the cost of delivering services. What is the opinion of the panel on this matter? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pierre, I think you have to tell us if you think there's too much regulation or not. It's a tough one.
Yeah, so it's really a trade-off between regulating on one side and creating common rules for everybody. And I think we've heard this morning that there were a few market problems that needs to be addressed. So having no rules is not going to help improve the situation. It's just going to further help concentrate the market. So it's important that we set a few common rules for everybody on the market in that respect. The fact that we're putting rules and we have been working very closely with member states for the past decade on this to try to put the rules at European level can help companies of any size, again, by demonstrating compliance once to have access to the entirety of the European market. And that also allows something that we've been preaching for a few years now, to federate capacities. We know it's going to be very difficult for smaller European players to build alternative to hyperscaler providers. Nevertheless, collectively, European players have the potential to build alternative offering. But there are two key prerequisites for this, some of which we've been discussing this morning. One is technical interoperability. That's absolutely essential. If it's indeed too costly to integrate different services, then the barrier of entry is just enormous. However, if the different providers are natively interoperable, that will really help with service composition. It will help with innovation as well, because what we see with the hyperscale model is there is a bit of a one-size-fits-all vis-à-vis customer. What we see increasingly as we're discussing with specific sectors of the economy is that customers, they want tailored services to their needs. They don't want the generic type of cloud service. So tailoring the services to specific user need is really definitely an avenue, and there is no specific rules for this. So if European providers can develop those services that correspond to the demand of both public and private users, there is definitely an untapped market potential. Something we have not discussed this morning, I think, is the rate of adoption of cloud services in Europe. It's still pretty low when you compare to other regions of the world. I think it's 41% currently in Europe, and mostly is really basic email storage type of services. When you look at advanced cloud services, the rate of adoption is very low. So that shows there is an enormous margin of progression in the field, which means really untapped potential for European cloud providers.
Thank you. I think we are already past the time, so I'd like to close the discussion here. I think you can talk to the panelists after the panel offline. If you're going to stay, there is food now that is being served, so please feel free. Again, thank you for joining this super interesting panel. We look forward to working with you, both with the regulator and the customers, those who certify that the products, and also to support the Gaia-X project in the coming weeks and months. Yeah. So thank you very much again, and have a good day.